Welcome to the Conscious Radio Network's YouTube channel. Become enlightened, have fun, and tell all your friends and family to share with everyone they know. You can find us on Facebook and stay up to date on our Facebook group, or find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Our podcasts can be found on Libsyn, iHeart, Spotify, Google Podcast, and more. Most of all, remember to go to our official website at consciousradionetwork.com for podcasts, hosts, future shows, and scheduling. We also want to welcome our international audience. Don't stop now. Enjoy the community. Subscribe today.
This is the Conscious Radio Network.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you might be on the spaceship we call Earth. Welcome to Conscious Radio Network's weekly podcast series, The Seance. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Paul Meckes. If this is your first time tuning in, please click subscribe, like, share, comment, and don't forget to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Today, America in Therapy. A master's in psychology and counseling from Antioch University, she co-directed the Parents United Sexual Abuse Treatment Program in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 2 years, and then went into private practice full-time. She has treated children, families, couples, and individual adults for 34 years and has worked extensively with abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics, their aftermath, and some of the most important elements for healing. She has published 2 books, A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire, and her latest book, which we will talk about today, America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. Let's welcome to the seance, Phyllis Leavitt. Welcome, Phyllis. How are you?
Well, I'm really good, and thank you so much for having me here today.
You are very, very, very welcome. So I've seen these things, this crisis a long time ago. I just started seeing it. Now I think we're starting to really recognize it. Most people, anyway, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What got you to write this book?
Yeah, I mean, probably like you, big observation about what's going on in the world, but really the heart of what had me actually sit down and write the book came out of my own experience, both doing psychotherapy as a client and many, many years being in practice, working with hundreds of people and seeing the deep level of trauma and dysfunction in a lot of families in America. And I'm sure that what I see here is also happening all over the world. In fact, we know that from some of the overt traumas that we're witnessing. But there were a couple of big ahas. Out of my own personal work, I realized the depth of suffering that can happen for anyone when we're not treated well by other people. And that suffering is really, a lot of us really try to hide it or compensate for it. We don't necessarily show it to the world, but as a therapist, you see it close and personal because people in psychotherapy really use that opportunity to open their hearts and be vulnerable and try to really release and reprocess and heal from some of the pain that they've experienced. And then, of course, it's never to say that there aren't wonderful things that happen with people. There are, but people don't go to therapy for the wonderful things that are happening to them with other people. Like a doctor, you go when something really isn't working for you and you're in pain and something is stuck or really not functioning. And so the second big aha was that having worked with so many families and even though I did my therapy myself, I was still working with the conditioning I received in my family and in my growing up years and in the larger communities that I lived in and was conditioned by and influenced by. And so I began to realize that the family system is actually the key to understanding so much about what goes right or what doesn't go right in our own psyches and our own lives. And that when people don't have a chance to heal from that, we tend to repeat what we know and carry it out into our adult lives and keep repeating the same patterns. And that's actually what brings a lot of people to therapy, is that no matter how hard they try, they keep attracting the same person, or they keep not being able to express themselves in their creativity, or they're not getting along with their kids, or they're suffering from addiction, or they're raging even when they don't want to, because there's an imprint of early conditioning and coping mechanisms that they haven't been able to unwind and undo. And the next big aha, and then please jump back in, was that having worked so intimately with family systems and family therapy, which I think is a very important lens in the world of psychology today, that I began to see America as a family system. All large groupings of people operate on certain kinds of family dynamics, either healthy or not. And to the extent that those family dynamics are abusive, or they target certain individuals, or they encourage divisiveness or violence or exploitation, those are unhealthy family dynamics. And from the world of psychology that I'm so steeped in, it's clear what the symptoms are, and it's clear what happens if we don't address the symptoms. And I see them happening in our country. And I think that's probably what you're referring to when you say you've been seeing this for a long time. And I think many of us see what's going on in the country, but don't necessarily have the lens of psychology with which to understand it and maybe address it in a way that we try to help individuals and families when they're dysfunctional or abusive, and try to break that cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to cycles, I this could be another show when I bring this up. That through the decades, I started seeing, I'm sure you might be able to agree with this, is the collapse of the traditional nuclear family.
Mm-hmm.
That when you say family, it's not, I'm seeing the loss of the traditional family.
Yeah.
Do you feel that that is also a contributor to the problem?
I definitely do, because my work really was family work. Whether you're working with one individual or one child or a couple or a family, you're always working with the family system that they were affected by.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that, I mean, there's so many contributing factors, and I'm sure we could probably have a whole panel of experts from,
Yeah.
From economy and religion and sociology, and people who are experts in the social media and in, all of that. But I think that just from my experience working with so many people over the years, the level of dysfunction in their families is enormous. It's really enormous. And I think our families really are suffering. I think parents are stressed. I think a lot of people are, stuck in jobs that they don't want, but they feel trapped in them because they have to make a living and support their kids. There's social pressures to always look good and look like you have it together and get the next thing. There's an enormous economic pressure in our country. And then there's the environment we live in, which is sort of encouraging that we target certain populations as the problem. And so people, I think, less and less are looking to, and this doesn't go for everyone, of course, nothing I say goes for everyone, but less and less to, like, who am I being in this and what could I do, rather than like continuing to learn to focus on blaming somebody else for the problems. And so you have that on the nuclear family level, you have that in communities, you have it in the larger venues of institutions, and coming down from the top in the government, so that the health of the family actually isn't even a national priority.
Yeah. I've seen, I mean, I've got friends, I've got family. I mean, I even hear this from my mother, from some of her friends, that are, in the later age group of the baby boom generation. And they're all, going through these problems where there is not that community support like there used to be.
Right.
There's not, you have an issue. We were always told, well, go to one of these outreach programs and just check out all the outreach programs. But then when they do, they're not there. They can't find them, or they're understaffed, or they're underfunded, or they're not around anymore. So
yeah, and I think, there's so many contributing factors here, but one that comes to my mind is that I think we still have this attachment to the idea that we're supposed to be independent. I'm
Mm.
supposed to take care of my needs myself. And I think that's actually gotten a lot stronger, at least in part of the population. It's not sexy, it's not appealing, it's not attractive to actually say that you need something. And we have a climate in our country, I call it the family of America, because I'm really looking at our country through the lens of family systems. We have a climate of targeting people who say they're in need, who say they're suffering from injustice, who don't feel like they have equal opportunity or equal access to medical care or education or housing. We have this horrible word that's come up that these people are entitled, that these
Mm.
are entitlements rather than why in our family do we not want to provide for everyone? Just
Yeah.
like in an individual family, if we had parents that weren't providing for all their children, we'd say, what's wrong with them?
Yeah. Yeah. And naturally, I've always felt this, that as human beings, no matter where on the globe you are, we're naturally socially codependent.
100%. We are, and I think that's what is so sad about this ideal of independence that's actually, I think, infiltrating our politics. America can be independent. We don't need anybody else. We're our own great nation, which
Hmm.
is it's an illusion. It's not just a fantasy, it's an illusion. We depend on every single other person in this world to be safe, to keep our earth habitable, to not pollute the water or the air. And none of us, I mean, most people I know, and there are probably a few people out there who grow their own food, but most people don't grow their own food, don't provide their own energy sources, don't pave the roads that they need to drive on or manufacture cars. We are completely dependent for everything that keeps us alive and thriving for people, the people who are working in manufacturing countries and factories in other countries. And so the illusion that we can be independent and claim independence is really an illusion that we know in family systems. Children depend on their family to be healthy.
Yeah.
Spouses depend on their partners to be safe, to be healthy, to be relational. We depend on our employers. It's on and on and on. And psychologically, it's actually healthy to embrace that dependence. That's a sign of strength that I know I need you.
Yeah.
You know you need me. And in that way, we have a motivation to actually work it out with each other because we need each other.
Hmm. We have to, and I've always believed this, is that we all have an obligation to be of service to our
Yeah,
fellow man, to our fellow human being. And that's always been a principle in just about every religion and every culture.
yeah, yeah.
So,
And what I would say about that is, I definitely feel that, and that's actually why I wrote my book. I want to be of service with what I've learned through the whole field of psychology and healing from dysfunction and abuse and neglect, because I feel that we're in desperate need of that. It's not really about blaming anybody. It's about, can we educate ourselves about what makes healthy human relationship, what makes us safe to be with one another, what are the skills we need to learn to actually settle our conflicts without violence,
mm,
because that's one of the huge ones. And I think it's hard, like in any profession, like healing profession. If you go to a doctor and you have intense pain, the doctor might have to give you some bad news. Your appendix is rupturing, you have to go into surgery right now,
yeah.
right? It's not what you want to hear, but there's a possibility of staying alive and thriving if you listen to the advice of someone who knows what's happening in your body, right?
Yeah.
And I think psychology is sort of the last frontier where we haven't turned to a wealth of knowledge that's in this field about what helps us have healthy human relations and what helps us heal and break the cycle of abuse and violence when we don't have healthy human relations. Because, and it's an imperfect science like most sciences, and
Hmm.
each person is different, and probably each therapist is different, but it is possible to break the cycle of violence and neglect and hurt and dysfunction in families. And our nation is made up of individuals and families. So if individuals and families can do it, a nation can do it if we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah. Being conscientious. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel a lot of people too are starting to, lack of a better word, wake up. They're waking up. They're kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
realizing that I need more control of myself. I need to take my power back. I
right,
need to either look at
right.
holistic options for taking care of myself instead of going to the doctor, or
Mm-hmm.
and I'm seeing these. You have the direct and indirect therapy. You've got people
Right.
that are actually going to psychology, going to see you, but then there's a lot of people out there too, and I've I've faced it. A lot of my friends have faced it. Is the indirect therapy where
Mm-hmm.
you're just given drugs, you're just given pharmaceuticals to cover up a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a proponent of that, and I'm also not a prescribing person. I just, a psychotherapist,
Yeah,
not a prescribing psychologist or psychiatrist. But yes, and I think that's also symptomatic that of a lack really of education of that you can't just medicate pain from dysfunctional relationships away. You can numb it out. You can maybe feel a little less depressed, and sometimes there's an appropriate place for medication, but this sort of like quick fix and be
mm,
back on, be back on. I haven't looked up the statistics recently, but the number of Americans on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications today is ginormous.
I
And what
bet.
does that say about the family of America? And can we look at it like, why are so many people depressed? What are they suffering from? They're not suffering just from something biochemical, they're suffering from something in their environment. So, to address it in the most severe cases biochemically requires that you address it on a psychological level.
Yeah, yeah,
I just quickly wanted to say something because I skipped over what you said about service, and I thought that was such an important point because what I have found as myself in my own journey and with so many people that have really had a chance to heal from some of the things that really set them back in life is that it's almost an automatic response that you want to be kinder to other people. You want to find some way to contribute. And it can be on a very small scale in just the circle of people in your life, or it could be that you change your career and you want to do something that's more of a social service, oriented kind of profession. So I just really want to emphasize that that's so beautiful what you said, because it is in our nature when we're really free to be ourselves and we can lift the veil of the negative things that have been put on us, that we want to help other people. We want to love them better,
hmm especially when we see people suffering. When we
especially.
see firsthand people suffering, and hopefully
Yeah,
the people who see that are empathetic and can relate and go,
yeah,
I need to help. I need to do
yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have been in therapy, and I know I have been, and not every therapist was perfect, and therapists are just like people, they have their own work to do as well. But when you find yourself with someone who it's really safe to really be vulnerable and open up and talk about the depths of what you've experienced and all the negative things you've come to believe about yourself, or the coping mechanisms that you've adopted that aren't serving you or aren't serving the people around you. And you can really be safe and not judged, and in a process where you can heal from the worst of what generated that in you in the first place. There's nothing like it.
Mm.
There's nothing like having that safety to actually not be perfect and not look like we're always good or have it all together or we're totally independent and we can do it all on our own, because we
Yeah.
just
Yeah. And for those who either may be listening or viewing, for anybody out there that doesn't feel comfortable reaching out to yourself or anybody in this practitioner for help, what is the best thing that you can tell them that can lighten the
can't.
load, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, not everybody's going to go to therapy, and I'm not saying that psychotherapy is a one size that fits all for everybody anyway. And there are many, many people who can't go. They don't have access, they can't
Mm,
afford it, they don't have insurance. There's social stigma for them. which, also I feel like we need to address on a much larger level than just individually. But, what I would say is, first of all, I want to say two things. One of them is that you don't have to be a therapist to be helpful to other people. We can all be a little kinder. We can all be a little more understanding. We can all do our own work on ourselves. If I feel like I get angry too easily, I can try to work to mitigate that and get to the source of my own anger. Maybe it's some other way. Maybe it's a spiritual practice. Maybe I just need to take some long hikes or exercise more because that gets a different body chemistry going for me. Or maybe it's my pets, or maybe it's my creativity, or it's loving my children. Whatever it is. I mean, many people have an intuitive sense of what they actually need. Maybe they need to be a little bit more social and not so isolated, or they need to cut back on alcohol, or they need to engage in something in the community, or they need to get into their art and really let that part of themselves find expression in the world. I mean, there's a million things I could add to that list. I think we all are actually born with an intuitive sense of what serves us and what our basic nature wants to express. And to the extent that we don't live in a functional environment, in a healthy environment, or an environment that really encourages our greatest strengths, our greatest gifts, and reflects them back to us, or discourages us, or puts them down, or ignores us, or sees us as inferior no matter how we've manifested, or what we look like, or whatever it is, that people stop trusting their intuition. And I really see that, especially when there's abuse and neglect, is that it's not safe to trust your own intuition. Because if you really could trust your intuition, you'd get out of there. Yeah. But if you're a little kid, you can't get out of there. Or if you're a spouse who's completely economically dependent on a partner who's hurting you, you might not feel like you can get out of there. So we stop listening to our own inner wisdom. And psychotherapy, I think, is one of the great ways to start listening to that and being in a safe place where you can. But psychotherapy is not the only venue. It might be that you go out and commune in nature. It might be a place where it might be church. It might be where you go to meditate. It might be in your art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pick up art, pick up fishing, hunting, something. It's a hobby.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many hobbies out there.
Right, that calls to you. Like, find one thing. I mean, I know people who have found incredible healing in nature. Does it heal if they were sexually abused or beaten as a kid? It might not heal that wound, but it might bring them the relief that helps them function better in the world.
Mm-hmm. And like you said too, and I wanted to come back to it, is like you said, loving kindness is the best part of therapy. It is therapeutic, and more people need to show that, with everyone, is just be kind to everybody, be respectful, be kind. And by showing that, a hug, I mean, just the energy level of a hug, somebody give somebody a hug today, and that is so therapeutic in and of itself.
Well, to me, what you're saying is actually the bottom line. That is the essence of all healing. You might have to go, down into some darkness to uncover your loving nature, or be able to receive love or give it to others. But it is absolutely bedrock in terms of healing, no matter what avenue I believe that you're taking. And one of the things I have discovered as a therapist is that, well, first of all, we know this even scientifically, that we come into this world wired for love and connection. Mm-hmm. And the way I say it is love and connection, and then there's, things you can add to that: safety and non-judgment and support and nonviolence and cooperation, and celebration of diversity. We could name 10 things, but if I reduce it to love and belonging is the best food for human beings.
Yeah.
We thrive on love and belonging. And to the extent that people don't get that from other people, they become symptomatic. And that's really the heart of psychology. It really is.
Yeah. And saying that segues into my next question, is based on your book. What are a couple of the, aside from that, what are a couple or a few key points that we should be addressing on helping us get out of this rut, off this cliff?
Well, a couple of things. One is that, and part of the reason why I wrote this book is just to help, share some of what I've learned as information. So if you know that eating a certain substance is going to make you ill, hopefully you're not going to eat it, even if it tastes good to you, right? Because it
Yeah.
makes you throw up or it gives you a seizure or whatever. And so part of my purpose is really outlining what are the dynamics in families and between people that make us mentally unwell, that make us psychologically disturbed. Someone who's a mass shooter didn't get born a mass shooter. Something happened to them that really disconnected them from their humanity and from the humanity of other people to the point where they could perpetrate that kind of violence, which is often suicidal.
Yeah.
So we have to educate ourselves about what are the dynamics of neglectful, dysfunctional, and abusive families that we can now start to identify happening on larger levels of society, including coming down from government and large institutions that are hurting so many people. What are the symptoms? What are the things that help break that cycle? And I really try to go into those things in detail. So a couple of things that I talk about in depth in my book, which we don't have time to go into depth, but there are some really big paradigm shifts that we're desperately in need of. So I'll give a quick medical example. When we first discovered that there were germs and bacteria that were causing some of the illnesses that were plagues that people were suffering from, we had a chance to heal them. Before that, we could ascribe it to, a person was evil, or they had been, an evil spirit had taken them over, or they were, we could ascribe it to anything because we didn't know.
Yeah.
And today we still ascribe evil to a lot of people who are really symptomatic of the hurt that they've received. So one of the big paradigm shifts I think we're looking for is that to the extent that people are hurt by other human beings, they're going to manifest in some way that's not healthy. And we have to stop vilifying them. We have to understand that they actually really need help. Now, obviously, we can't help everyone. There are people who are so damaged, they've been so abused, they've been so neglected, they've been so discriminated against, they've been so, brutalized that we don't know how to help them. But there's a lot of people we do know how to help. A lot.
Do you have anything in your book that might help people recognize signs that somebody does need help?
Yeah, I mean, and I think we actually know what they are. That's the funny thing. If someone is raging out of control, they need help.
Yeah.
They're actually, they're manifesting their own pain. And it may be the role model they grew up with, or it may be they're so enraged about what happened to them that it finally comes out when they have a chance to express it, or they're so depressed they can't come out of their room, or they're highly addicted to video games or alcohol or drugs, or they suffer from depression, or they can't bond with their children, or they end up in one abusive relationship after another. The list, goes on, or some of the symptoms are less obvious. People who are just driven to succeed and they have to make more and more and more and more and more, but they're actually really in pain inside because they feel like they're nothing unless they have another million in the bank, or but they're really suffering. And I've worked with people like that who money was everything, but actually they were tortured little children inside who felt completely inadequate. I mean, so we see the symptoms around us. And one of the many things I try to point out in my book is that we want the best. We want the best cars. We want the best computers. We want the latest iPhone. We want the best medical treatment. We want to have the best of everything, except as a society, we have not asked for the best human relations.
Yeah.
And it's just the missing piece I feel like it's the big missing piece. I call it lying hidden in plain sight. How many mass shootings do we have to have before we say, what's going on in the larger family systems that we're living in that is not providing what people really need in the sense of love and belonging and all the other qualities that we listed, that they are so disconnected from themselves that this is what they do. They're
Yeah.
not evil people. And of course, we're all horrified when someone goes into a classroom and kills innocent children. We're horrified. And we want to vilify that person. But if we actually want to stop the abuse and we want to stop this, then we have to look at what happened to them. We do.
Yeah.
And address it. Address it.
Yeah. Like I said, my next comment will probably open up opportunities for more episodes or a continuation.
I'm great with that.
Right?
I love
It's like we've recognized it, like, like the last several mass shootings that have made international news.
Right.
When the information comes out, you start to realize that they had their eyes on this particular person for some
Right.
time. They knew it. They
Right.
knew it, and the signs were
Right.
out there for years, but nobody
Right.
did anything.
Right. Right. And I think you could just take that comment and expand it out to the world scene. Thousands of people are being bombed in their own homes, and
Yeah.
their children are dead. And we know it, and we're not stopping it. We know it. And so I say, and I think this is very, very important for us as human beings, that we still condone behaviors that we would never want perpetrated on ourselves, ever. None of us want to be, forced to leave our country. Because we have no food or we're being persecuted. None of us want to be bombed in our homes. None of us want to be jailed for the color of our skin. We don't want that, but we allow it to happen to other people.
Yeah.
And that disconnect, that severe disconnect, is actually a mental health issue. And we're being fed that it's an ideological issue, but it's not. It's a mental health issue. And we have to heal our mental health, because mentally healthy people don't want to bomb innocent people.
No.
They don't.
Exactly.
They don't want to build weapons of mass destruction. They don't.
I agree 100%. Yeah. So before we close off the show, and how can people find you, where they can reach out to you, where they can find your book? You can give your information out.
My book is on all the major booksellers now. And I see you're flashing my website. It's www.phyllisleavitt.com, and you can contact me on my website. If you sign up for my newsletter, I just recently added to my newsletter a free, pretty extensive PDF called The 6 Secrets to Repairing Relationship After Conflict, which is also a chapter in my book. But I've gone into, in this PDF, I've gone into it in a little bit more detail and expanded it out just to be applicable to a person in their own life. How can I apply these 6 elements in my own life? I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter and Facebook, and I have a lot of interviews on YouTube. I have interviews and blogs on my website. And anyone who wants to contact me, I'm totally open to, communicating with you and answering any of your questions or seeing how I could be of service.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Back anytime too. If you have another book or a continuation of your work and stuff, absolutely. Absolutely. Because this is important. I mean, this show is to help everybody, anybody and everybody. There's an episode somewhere from the seance over the years that can help somebody out there. Not all the shows are good for everybody, but hey, there's always something. But before we close the show, what would you like to deliver as a takeaway for our audience today?
I would like to deliver the takeaway that you actually said earlier on, because that's often my takeaway at the end of these. And that is, just be kind, go out of your way to be a little more patient, a little less reactive. For me, having been a psychotherapist and having worked with such terrible abuse and neglect that I've witnessed, you don't know if the person walking down the street is doing everything they can to just hold on because they're falling apart inside, or they're suffering from, abusive relationships, or they're traumatized, or they don't like themselves because they blame themselves for everything that's happened. And one person can make a difference. And I say this over and over, you don't have to be a therapist to be kind, to be helpful, to be of service. And I think in this day and age where a lot of people feel like the powers that be are just overwhelming and there's nothing I can do. It's just too much for me. I can't do it. And I think we need to know that we can do something, and that everybody's contribution, large or small, matters and makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to share this really quick. Sometimes I can get emotional, so
That's good.
exactly. But somebody had shared something with me about a week or so back. They were at a convenience store, and somebody had snapped at them, and they're like, "Whoa, like, what's going on?" and stuff like that. And they were willing to stop and kind of just listen. What's going on? You know, I I don't know what I did. I didn't cut you off in traffic. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. What's going on? They proceeded to try to, confront them, but they were still nasty. And
Hmm.
later on, as they had left the convenience store and got back to their vehicle, there was a letter on their dashboard, or not dashboard, on the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as they proceeded to read it, it said, "I am sorry. Please forgive me. My mother had just passed away."
Oh,
And
right. Right.
yeah, and
Right.
it's like you just don't know.
You don't know. And, for all of us who have had somebody, even if we weren't suffering, but just have somebody be super kind, super helpful, super patient with us when we didn't know what we were doing, we know how good that feels.
Hmm.
And it can change your whole day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Phyllis, blessings, my friend. Thank you for
Mm.
the work that you do. It is a
Well,
blessing to everybody.
thank you so much. And thank you for having me and giving me a chance to share. And I really would love to come back, because some of the deeper cuts of what I talk about, I would love to share in more depth, because I think they're things that we don't necessarily all know or think about.
Mm.
So, anytime. But
Oh,
anyway, I'm
definitely,
just
definitely.
grateful for this opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. The intro.
Yeah. Yeah. The intro. Okay.
Yeah. Cool, 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 cool. Thank you, Phyllis, very, very much. And thank you, everybody, for watching Conscious Radio Network's The Seance. And until next week, we will see you next time.